So I'm back in the YYZ after holidays in the Caribbean. I was away for a matter of, let's say, 2 weeks, so it was a great time away. Got to get some good sunlight and got to enjoy, I guess, the Christmas in Guyana. And I spent New Year's in Trinidad, so Christmas in Guyana, New Year's in Trinidad, and I'm back home today. So back to work, fully back to work. And this morning, I started working like at 4 o'clock this morning. 4 o'clock this morning, I started working. And I started working this early because I had some deadlines to catch up on. So today at 2 p.m., I had a filing deadline for a judicial review hearing that's coming up next week. So I had to file a confirmation of hearing, confirming that everything is okay and that the hearing is ready to proceed. I'm going to be arguing this judicial review on the 9th of January. And I set aside 90 minutes for my arguments and 180 minutes for the respondent's arguments. So I'm arguing against 3 different parties. And so they each got 60 minutes to argue their case or their positions. And I am arguing for 90 minutes. Right? So that's that. So I did that. So I was up at about 4 o'clock this morning, got that done. And then I went back to bed, only to be awakened by the police. Right? A constable, let's see what his badge number is, 1140 Green, PC Green, called me from 12th Division this morning. And PC Green called me and says, well, Mr. Peters, good morning. Sorry to get you up this early. One of your clients wanted to speak to you. And the client that wanted to speak to me is a former professor, a former marketing and economics professor. And he called me to tell me, look, Selwyn, this is what happened to me. And it's completely ridiculous. I don't understand it. I'm at my house, and I'm lying down, and there's knocking on my door. I woke up. I unlocked the door. The police arrested me for obstruct police because the police are saying that I didn't respond promptly enough to open my door. Well, the police showed up there without a warrant. And my client was sleeping. It was ridiculous to arrest him, take him to the station, and to put him in a cell and then have his lawyer being called on the basic premise that he didn't answer his door promptly enough. Like, what obligation does a citizen have to answer any door when anyone knock on the door? Is it going to be a problem now when a telemarketer knock on somebody's door and the person doesn't respond? I mean, I understand that the police is an authority figure. I understand that the police have more powers than other citizens, but those powers are circumscribed. police just can't arrest someone and lock them up and then call and then have a lawyer or two engage simply because the police feels that the person wasn't prompt enough in responding to their knock on the door. Like, what is this society going to? This is 2017. And guess what? The client is not even a 15, a 20, or 25, 30, or 35-year-old. My client is 72 years old. 72 years old, and that's what the police did to him. Toronto police, the first week in 2017. Who wants to deal with this sort of nonsense to start the new year? Not me as a lawyer, but I had to deal with this morning, and that's why I asked the police officer. When the police officer says, well, Mr. Peters, we arrested your client for obstruct police, I said to the officer, are there any other charges? I wanted to know whether any other charges come with that obstruct police. And I wanted to know the nature of the obstruct so that I write it down. I wrote it down as he said it so that if they change the script, I have the script as he said it at that time when I spoke to him this morning. So I'm happy that the client was released, but it's not over yet. I intend to speak to the client to see whether the client wants to pursue this further. My inclination is that it should be pursued further because it's a complete abuse of police authority. It cannot make sense on any level, the actions of the police here. I don't accept that it was an action that is justified in law or an action that I should accept as part of the normal operating procedure. It cannot be in these circumstances. It cannot be. So I'm not prepared to accept that. I think in this society and in most other societies, mental health is a serious issue. And over the holidays, we had a correctional officer who went to his wife's place of employment and killed her. So we had a correctional officer who killed his wife, or allegedly killed his wife, and here he was, only days before the killing, guarding prisoners, and now he becomes a prisoner himself. So that's quite troubling. That's quite troubling, a troubling situation with the young Sheldon Prince. I feel bad for the family of the woman that was murdered. And it highlights an issue that affects both males and females, is how does society respond to domestic violence, what resources are available to men and women who are in crisis arising from domestic affairs, and where the perpetrator is a person who is a law enforcer who has access to firearms and training. What resources are there to assess the mental health of law enforcers continually, so that if the person is in a serious crisis, the appropriate resources could be deployed? Because here you are giving someone the authority to use lethal force against civilians, and that person is undergoing a mental health crisis. So If that person is undergoing a mental health crisis and you have that person with a full array of use of force options, it puts not only that person at risk of self-harm, but it also puts the peoples under whose charge he's entrusted. You know, you put them at risk too. So I'm quite concerned about the Sheldon Prince situation, and we'll see how that one gets resolved. I was in Guyana, and when I was in Guyana, there was a big headline splashed across all the newspapers. Two persons committed a robbery, an armed robbery, and they were killed by the police in a churchyard, right? You see the headline, bandits shot dead by police, bandits shot dead in churchyard, bandits killed by police ID'd, who are known characters, one wanted for another crime. The problem with the situation, as it was reported in the news media, is the death of the men left more questions than what the police answered. And unfortunately, the media in Guyana didn't ask any probing questions, perhaps because the men were labeled as bandits. So, you know, perhaps that for that reason, the simple perfunctory story goes, right? The police said that after the robbery, right? This is what this article says, and you can see it here. The police are hailed as heroes by a Campbellville family after they shot and killed two bandits who robbed persons gathered at a family function at Lot 53, Seaford Street, Campbellville. Right? The men had stolen jewelry, cash, and valuables. Right? And one of the men was identified as 22-year-old Jamal Letlow of John Fernand's squatting area. And the other man was identified as Shaquille Fraser of Better Hope East Coast Demo. Right? The newspapers are reporting that the bandits were shot dead by ranks of the Guyana Police Force during an exchange of gunfire shortly after they robbed 6 persons on Seaford Street. Right? But this is what is troubling, and this is what concerned me about what the media said. The newspapers reported, right, that the police cornered these 2 men, which means that these 2 men couldn't go anywhere, right? They were cornered, and the police recovered an unlicensed firearm, and the firearm was a revolver with 5 live rounds and a spent shell next to the slain bandits, along with the stolen articles, which include 5 cellular phones, a chain, and cash, right? See what the media is reporting? This is public information the police released. An unlicensed revolver with 5 live rounds and a spent shell, right? While the news media reported that the bandits fired a shot at the residence where the now if the police fired on these bandits, and these bandits had 5 live rounds and 1 spent shell in in the revolver. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. It does not take a rocket scientist, and this video ought to be shared because this is crucial and analysis information. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to conclude that these two men who the police killed, who the police pumped almost 40 rounds of ammunition were discharged by the police at these two men, right? 40 rounds were discharged at these two men by the police officers of the Guyana Police Force. And only one round was discharged from that revolver, and that one round was discharged at the scene of the crime, not at the scene where the men met their death. So what that means is that there has to be an investigation into whether standard operation procedures were followed, whether or not reasonable force was used, whether or not less lethal force could have been used, whether or not the discharge of 40 rounds at two men who did not fire any shots at the police were necessary. On any analysis, one cannot come up with a plausible scenario that the men fired shots at the police. No shots were fired at the police. Absolutely none. And we know that because the men fired one shot at the Campbellville home where they committed the robbery before they fled, pursued by the police and the victims, right? So they were cornered in the church yard and executed. It's plain and simple as that they were subject to an extrajudicial killing. And that is something that cannot be covered up by the Guyana Police Force. That is something that has to be tested. That is something that has to be properly and thoroughly investigated, and it has to be litigated. The problem in this case is obviously the two men that were killed they're young, they're black, they had a firearm, they're known to the police, and they're poor. One of them lived in John Fernandez squatting area. So you know what's going to happen with that. No, it's not going to get anywhere because these two men that died, their family probably wouldn't have the resources to engage proper counsel. And not only that, but the public would not be alarmed because after all it's two bandits, right? And the mentality in certain sectors in Guyana is, well, you know, it's two bandits died, so we got two less bandits to deal with. And that cannot be the test in a rights-based society. You know, it can't be the test. It cannot be the test in a rights-based society to say, well, you know, it's two less bandits we have. No, I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. I mean, so it leads to what the police would have said after they made the arrest. So, you know, in Canada, especially in Ontario, we have a situation where if a serious incident occurs where a suspect is killed or seriously injured, the police are under a duty to prepare their statements forthwith. they're required to provide their statements immediately, and they have no right to consult a lawyer to assist them with the creation of those statements. So your statement is produced while your memory is fresh, and you're required to produce those statements before you leave off duty. No lawyers can sort of vet your statement and add to your statement or delete from your statement to make it litigation proof. You're required to provide those statements forthwith. Right? Whether you're a subject officer or whether you are an officer who was a witness to the occurrence. So in the Guyana situation, there's no such legislation where the police officers are required to provide statements to the investigators right away. So we don't know whether or not the police officers have provided statements to the Police Complaints Authority or Internal Affairs or whatever unit is investigating this serious occurrence. But in the case of these two men, Jamal Letlow and the other youngster, the other 22-year-old that was slaughtered with 20 bullets, there has to be Shaquille Fraser. There has to be a proper investigation. Has to be, must, mandatory. Especially in the case where the police poured ammunition into those two men, and those two men fired no shots at them. So, and that speaks to our culture, our rights-based culture, our culture of human rights. The police, regardless of who the person is, has to respect the criminal law, the constitutional law, and the human rights of the person with whom they're interacting. Right? It's not sufficient for anyone to say, well, you know, you play with fire, you get burnt. No, not in our society that's right-based, and not in our society where a lot of rights or a lot of power, a lot of authority is given to the police. We have to ask questions, and we have to ask very searching questions where and when the police take the lives of citizens, regardless of who the citizens are, right? And so this particular case involving Jamal Letlow and Shaquille Fraser calls for an inquest, and it calls for a thorough criminal investigation. Those are the two steps it calls for. And it calls for actions to be taken against those police officers if they did not forthwith provide a statement or reports, occurrence reports as to their actions and their inactions. And it also calls for sanctioning of any superior officers that obstructed or in any way covered up, so that a meaningful investigation would not have been taken place into the deaths of those two men. I am very troubled by the deaths of Jamal Letlow and Shaquille Fraser, and I wanted to think about it for a week. I wanted to ruminate on it, and I wanted to sort of commiserate internally within my own value system before I say anything on the deaths of those two young men. But I think, all in all, the deaths of those two young men warrant a thorough and a proper investigation. Nothing else. would suffice, and the Guyana Police Force would be well advised to conduct a proper investigation, and if the officers use excessive force, excessive lethal force where such force was not necessary, to take the appropriate action, regardless of who the suspects are. The Guyana Police Force has to come across to the public as an organization that will follow the law. Nothing else will suffice in a just society, regardless of who supports the killing of bandits. Let the court decide the issue. The police officers, their jobs are law enforcement. That's why you have a adversarial system with defense counsel, with prosecutors, and with a judge. They make the determination as to guilt or innocence. But to summarily take those men out in a churchyard must, and I say must, shall require an inquest, and it does require thorough criminal investigation into the officer's conduct. It also requires an administrative review, of course, to see whether standing orders were followed, and whether there's any other processes that the Guyana Police Force could have employed to take the men into custody rather than killing them. So that's the major issue that was on my mind for today, and I had to speak about it since the Guyana Police Force has to do better. They cannot continue to join the ranks of police forces such as that in Brazil. In Brazil, the neighboring country, extrajudicial killing of people who are called bandidos or such names are quite rampant. And with impunity in the Philippines, the president of the Philippines sanctions extrajudicial killing. Guyana hasn't reached to that stage yet. As far as I know, the president is against extrajudicial killing. The Minister of National Public Security, Khemraj, Ramjattan, he is strongly against the police acting outside the law. And so they should be. The police should act within the four walls or the confines of the law. And if they act outside the confines of the law, then condign action should be taken against them. So that's this post for now. I think there's enough to chew on this particular post, but I gotta get back to work so that I can get to the meat of litigation in 2017. This is the last year I'm practicing law as a barrister. I think that I'm going to retire after this year and probably become a judge or something else, or a farmer or a laborer or something else. But after this year, I'm doing something else. I'm not doing litigation as a lawyer. I'm doing something else. All right, bye. Look at the beautiful view from my office. See my Guyana flag? I'm proudly Guyanese. This flag flies, I don't know how much story high. I'm 22 story high, but it's clear outside today, and so got a good view of the buildings that's in the neighborhood. Not a lot of traffic outside. See, not a lot of traffic outside, but that's the view from my office. I pay a lot of money for this view.